Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today I'm doing a Shake Shack hack that I had written for the YouTube channel 2-3 months ago now. It involves a couple of things. I believe the thing that Shake Shack had called it was technically it's not, because I think Korean fried chicken has a very specific approach to how to fry fried chicken. But it does contain a gochujang glaze, which I guess will make it some kind of Korean. So I'm going to take a look at that. We're going to be doing it in a sandwich today. So I'm going to be putting it in a potato bun with a side or a garnish of kimchi. So we're going to be doing that. So if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about gochujang fried chicken or Korean food or anything, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful. If you're looking for the recipe for this particular fried chicken, it always lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel, that's where all of the recipes live. They're coming out every Friday. So this one came out, I believe, a Friday in November or December, something like that, sometime over the winter. And it's been one of my favorite ways of making fried chicken ever since, because it is super, super tasty. And gochujang glaze is one of my absolute favorite approaches to making fried chicken. So we're going to take a look at that today. So if you have any questions, feel free and drop them in the chat. Oh, hello there. Awesome. That's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up, actually. Yes. Have I been a victim of any Asian hate so far? Yes, I've been a victim of Asian hate pretty much all my life. But definitely a substantial spike in hate crimes against Asians here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and thank you for bringing that up. That's something that I've been meaning to talk about. But yeah, it happens all the time, pretty much every day. Usually in the forms of microaggressions. I'm actually part of a neighborhood watch, though. We basically, so I live here in Chinatown. For those who have tuned in before, probably know this about me already. But I live here in Chinatown in Oakland, and that's actually Chinatown in Oakland is where those hate crimes have been hit hardest. Mostly because those hate crimes are against older Asian folks, and Chinatown is filled with old Asian folks. So I'm actually part of a really cool volunteer group called Compassion Oakland, where we, I guess it's like technically a neighborhood watch. We're like, I guess, like volunteer security guards, but not really, though. Essentially what we're doing is just walking around and making sure that people stop pushing over old Asian people. So yeah, if you haven't checked them out, they're really cool. If you especially live in the Bay Area, I believe they're looking for donations and probably volunteers too. And I think it's compassionoakland.org, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. Hermina, yeah, how's it going? Carpe diem, how's it going? Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, thank you for asking, though. That's been a hot button issue, and I've been meaning to post something about that on YouTube. But yeah, it's been happening all over Oakland, all over the San Francisco Bay Area. I guess technically all over America too. So tough times to be an Asian. Cool. Anyway, though, back to fried chicken. So for our gochujang glazed fried chicken, what we're going to do, this is going to happen in 2 separate stages. So the first stage is going to be our deep fry. So over on the stove, we could take a look. Over on the stove, I have my deep fryer. It is not heating up yet because I don't want it to reach temperature too early. But first thing that we're going to do is bread our fried chicken or technically not bread it, just batter it in a tempura batter. And then we're going to drop it into that oil and give it a deep fry. And then from there, we're going to remove it and then drop it into a glaze. So we're going to pull everything out of the wok and then refry it in a second fry in the glaze. So we want to do a couple of things in order to make sure that works. So I guess like the biggest problem that I've run into when I work with glazes is essentially what you're doing when you're frying something in a glaze is that you're coating it in a liquidy substance, which means that it has a lot of opportunity to go soggy. So if you've ever had a soggy glazed fried chicken, that's because it is really tricky to get a crispy piece of fried chicken from a glaze. It's a lot easier to get a crispy piece of fried chicken that doesn't have a glaze because it's just fried. You pull it right out of the fryer and it's crispy immediately after you pull it out. But if you're trying to coat it in a glaze, there's a second cook that comes after that. And that's going to be the same. So a glaze will work the same way as you would see any other form of fried chicken in like most American Chinese cuisine. So things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, orange chicken, all of those things, they're using a very, very similar approach. What essentially it's doing is frying the chicken and then glazing it in a second fry, also in the wok. So in order to make sure that that chicken comes out of the glaze and it's still crispy, we have to approach the glaze in a very specific way. So in my experience, that usually involves making sure that we don't add too much oil in that second fry. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a lot of trouble getting that glaze to stick. Yeah. Spoon to remove ginger. Yeah, that's. I guess I do that on every stream, so I stopped paying attention to the fact that I was doing that. But yes, using the spoon to remove the skin of ginger is one of my favorite shortcuts of all time, because it just saves so much time. So if you've ever like had to or tried to peel ginger with a potato peeler, it is really, really hard because ginger has a lot of like really small nooks and crannies that are like not really like great or easy to get into when you're using something like a potato peeler. But the trick with ginger is that it's not very that skin is not super thick. So what we can do is just get the soft side of the back of the spoon and pull it right off. And then it comes right off, and using with a spoon, it's a lot easier to get into those nooks and crannies. So yeah, I also I do that. I do the ginger on every stream, so I oftentimes forget to talk about it because I've done it so many times. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Excuse me. What kind of oil do I use in the wok? Good question. So I'm going to be using a couple of types of oil today. So for the fry, I'm going to be using peanut oil, which is probably like one of the more standard types of oil to do wok fries in. Probably most of the Chinese food, or maybe even like all pan Asian food, definitely anything that comes together in a wok, it's probably using peanut oil. For sure, any kind of Chinese food is using peanut oil. But really, anything that has high heat potential will work. So I very, very frequently, you will see me using vegetable oil when I forget to buy peanut oil. It's going to work just fine. But the flavor of peanut oil is probably the thing that you would associate most with wok cooking. For the deep fry, though, so I'm going to use a different kind of oil for the deep fry. And that's mainly because peanut oil is relatively speaking, a little bit more expensive than other things. So for the deep fry, when I do the deep fry, usually what I'll do is I'll use whatever is cheapest. So and that's because I just change the deep fryer oil so often that it's just it's super cost prohibitive if you're going to deep fry in peanut oil. If I was deep frying in peanut oil, it would cost like $15-20 every time I change the oil, which would be like $15-20 every couple of weeks, which is super, super expensive. So what I do instead is I just fry it in the cheapest oil that I can find. So I think I'm using, we're using canola oil today for the fryer. And it's just like Mazola canola oil, which is not an oil that I love cooking in because it has like a kind of a weird flavor to it when it gets too hot. So canola oil especially, but definitely specifically Mazola canola oil, when it reaches a certain smoke point at a really, really high heat, it will start almost like it's burning, but it shouldn't be burning because it's canola oil. And it has a weird taste to it that I don't like. So I don't generally, whenever possible, I don't find myself frying in Mazola canola oil. Definitely, I frequently will use canola oil all the time, but I'm probably using something more expensive. But when I'm deep frying, though, just the cheapest thing I can find, because I'm going to change it so often that it's just super cost prohibitive otherwise. One day closer to the weekend, yeah. Cool. So that's our green onion. Sorry, I just talked right through this, but what I just did was sliced up our green onions. So green onions, they have two halves to it. So this on the left is our whites, and this on the right is our greens. So the thicker part is the whites, and those whites are a lot more durable than the greens, which means that we can slice them up and throw them into our wok fry, and they're going to withstand that really, really high heat of the wok fry. If we were to try to do that with the greens, they would pretty much just fall apart, so we don't want to do that. But for the whites, though, we could totally do that, and it will absolutely hold together. Paul, is the food that I make in every video, is it for my own dinner or is it for the family? Oh, good question. Yeah, lots of people ask that. Yeah, for the most part, what I'm cooking, it's what I'm eating for dinner. That's also why, so if you've ever wondered, so I guess this is worth pointing out, but if you've ever wondered, so every Friday there's a new recipe video that comes out on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're on. And then every Monday, almost always when you tune in on Monday, I'm probably going to be cooking through the recipe that came out on Friday. The only exception to that is if the recipe that came out on Friday is not something that I can eat for dinner. So we didn't do a live stream for popcorn chicken. We didn't do a live stream for marble tea eggs, stuff like that. Coming up in a couple of weeks, I think in 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be a recipe for steamed eggs. Which is like a Chinese breakfast, which I'm not going to do a live stream for because there's all things that I can't eat for dinner, so I'm probably not going to stream it. But good catch though, yeah, that's the reason why. Otherwise this would be really, really expensive. I would have to buy a lot of food. Cool, so up next what I'm working on right now is I'm assembling the, I guess you could call this the glaze, or like what I always refer to this as the sauce portion of any wok fry. In this particular instance, I would refer this as the glaze because it is literally going to be the thing that glazes our fried chicken. So to that end, we have to do something very specific with this sauce. So normally when you see me assembling sauces for wok fries, I'll probably be a little bit loose with it. Mostly because what's really, really important to me is that the proportions of things that go into the sauce are right. So that means we can stop, taste to season, and then adjust. So super, super often I'll follow a recipe and then I'll taste it and something's not quite right, and you'll probably see me maybe adding a pinch of salt, maybe adding a little bit more soy sauce, maybe adding more gochujang, things like that. And then we kind of adjust to taste. In this particular instance, we have to be very specific with this glaze because if it has too much oil or if it has too much liquid, you're going to have some trouble getting the glaze to stick to the fried chicken. And this has happened to me, I think the first or second time that I tested out this recipe. I ran into this problem. Definitely I ran into this problem when I was like General Tso's chicken, and like the first time I really tried to figure out like Asian glazed fried chicken. Is that if it has too much, especially if it has too much oil in it, it won't stick to the fried chicken. Then you're going to have a real hard time. What you'll end up doing if it has too much oil in it is you're going to wok fry it for too long because you're trying to get that glaze to stick. And what you end up having to do is burning off some of that water and probably burning off some oil too. And then what happens if you wok fry it for too long is it's essentially, it's just going to turn soggy. So that's how you end up with soggy fried chicken, glazed fried chicken. So to that end, that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and followed by 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. And that is actually going to be all of the liquid that we're going to put into this glaze. So that's just over 1/4 cup of liquid. And then all of that is probably going to burn off in the wok fry pretty quickly. Otherwise though, everything else is going to be thicker, so we're going to be relying on the use of gochujang and honey to build out that super thick glaze. So this single tablespoon of sesame oil, that's just for flavor, and then the other source of oil is going to come from our fryer oil. Other than that, though, we're being very careful not to add too much oil here, otherwise things are going to start falling apart. Peanut is gold, yeah. What is that? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Carpe diem, I'm not sure what you're referring to. What I just... Oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah, I got you. So yeah, that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and then 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. And then 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. So those are the 4 things. If you're looking for it, I guess I should be linking this too. If you're looking for it, the proportions are all on the recipe video, so I can link this. Here's the recipe. And the recipe video, just like everything else that's published in a recipe video on the YouTube forum, it kind of moves a little bit slower, and we definitely talk through all of the proportions and like moves a lot slower. And also, if you're trying to reproduce this recipe, and I know this is a really popular one. People like to have been cooking this one at home. I know I've seen at least 3 or 4 people have sent me photos of doing this one. So if you're doing this one, I would recommend booking the YouTube video, bookmarking the YouTube video, and then keeping that on file. because I have definitely tried to reproduce recipes from live streams, and it's really hard because live streams move so slow. Yeah. Cool. So up next, probably the most important, it's in the title, the most important part of this glaze is going to be 2 tablespoons of gochujang. 2 tablespoons, it might not seem like a lot for it being the most important part of this recipe, but gochujang is extremely concentrated, so I generally will not see me use more than 2 tablespoons of gochujang in literally any recipe, even a recipe that is named after the ingredient, because it is so concentrated that it will like overpower any dish that you use it in if you use more than like a tablespoon or 2. You like asking questions? Yeah, I like when people ask questions. Otherwise, it's just me talking to myself, which I've done before. Cool. Next up, this is going to be 2 tablespoons of honey, or 1/8 of a cup. And I don't think you need too much honey here. So if you want to lean really, really hard into like the American tendencies of like glazed fried chicken, you could lean heavier on the honey. I don't like adding too much honey in fried chicken whenever possible because I feel like it's a little bit too sweet. What we're going to be adding instead is going to be 2 tablespoons of sweet chili sauce. So super often I use this ingredient a lot in recipes where I'm like trying to hack a lot of like Chinese Americanized Chinese dishes. So we have I have a series on the YouTube channel that's dedicated to reproducing like Americanized Chinese foods. So we do a lot of things like General Tso's chicken and honey sesame chicken, stuff like that. And in that series, I oftentimes will do a second version of that recipe where I'll do like a less Americanized version and like borrow more heavily from things that come from like traditional Chinese cuisine. So when I do those recipes, those alternate recipes, they very often will remove some of that honey or like all of the honey sometimes and replace it with this sweet chili sauce, which comes from, I believe it comes from Thai cuisine, but I have seen it in almost all Asian cuisine at this point. Yeah. Oh yeah, napsi. Yeah, good question. When I say sesame oil, I'm generally referring to toasted sesame oil. Those are 2 different things. Good point though. Toasted sesame oil and sesame oil are very different, and that's because toasted sesame oil is for finishing, sesame oil is for cooking in. I think regular sesame oil is a little bit cheaper, but I have not really experimented much in like cooking with it, because even when it's not toasted, it's still really expensive. But yeah, generally, if you see me seasoning with sesame oil, it's toasted sesame oil. Although I have tried seasoning with regular sesame oil and it works fine. Yeah, the ajuma, that's... I never really paid attention. It says Han Asia. Yeah, I don't know, for some reason gochujang is hard to find around here. I can only ever find it at Ranch 99, so I guess in Chinatown, anytime that you're in Chinatown and you try to locate ingredients that are not Chinese, it gets really hard to find them. So I can find like some really obscure Chinese stuff that you would only use like twice a year, even if you're like legit Chinese Asian trying to do some legit Chinese stuff, you would really only use it like twice a year, probably like Chinese New Year. So like some of the stuff that I do on Chinese New Year, you can only find that in Chinatown. But even in Chinatown, I still can't find a lot of ingredients like gochujang because just it never comes up in Chinese food. So I would have to like travel across town to get gochujang. So super often, I think I got that gochujang on Amazon because you have to travel really far to get it. Cool, so that's our sauce. Ooh, that is quite sweet. Like I mentioned earlier, seasoned to taste. My glaze right now is a little bit sweeter than I'd like, so I'm going to add a bit of salt to offset some of that sugar. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, gochujang. So I should add that gochujang it's not an obscure Korean ingredient. Gochujang is probably like the single most popular Korean ingredient in existence. It's just for whatever reason in Chinatown it's really hard to find Korean ingredients. So we do have a Korean grocery store here in Oakland called Koreana, but it's like all like straight, like clear across town. It's like 50 blocks away, so I can't walk there. I would probably have to drive or maybe take the bus. So if I can't walk there, then it makes it a lot more difficult to find it. Cool. Let's do our glaze next. Or not our glaze, just the glaze. H Mart, yeah, that's the big one. H Mart. Lots of people go to H Mart. Oh yeah, Paul. Yeah, what I'm making is I guess that's important to clarify. So what we're making today is a proportion for 2. Generally speaking, when I'm streaming stuff, I'm either making a proportion. That's not actually true. Sometimes they're like larger, especially like the soups or the curries. They can serve like 3 or 4 people. I also like part of like everything that I cook goes to my brother, who recently had a baby, so he's been getting a lot of leftovers from me. But if you're looking for like the proportion size for everything that I cook, it lives on the YouTube video. So either in the YouTube, I forget if it's in the YouTube video or it's in the written link on the website. So I think it's definitely on the website. If you go to woocancook.com and you find the recipe, you can see like how many it serves. This part, specifically, this will serve 2. Yeah, generally speaking, it will serve 2 to 3, except for like the curries and like some of the soups and stuff, which will probably serve like 4 to 5. Cool. So next up, I'm going to assemble my tempura batter, which obviously, if you're paying attention, does not come from Korean food. It comes from does not come from Korean food. It comes from Japanese food. But I love doing tempura batter whenever I have the opportunity to do one, because in my experience, it's one of the crunchiest ways of battering a fried chicken that I have found so far, second to the double fry. So I think I'm going to do today is double fry a tempura batter here. And I mentioned this on a lot of streams, pretty much any time that I separate egg whites. But for separating egg whites, 3 separate bowls. So here's my first bowl. This is the separated egg white. And then I'm dropping the yolks in the second, and then the final egg whites are ending up in my larger bowl, which is going to be for my batter. You have to have 3 bowls. You cannot do it with anything less than 3 bowls. Never, ever, ever try and separate your egg whites over 1 bowl, especially if you're doing like 3 or 4 or 5 egg whites, because if you get to that 5th egg white and it breaks, which you'll notice in one of my bowls, that first yolk broke, you're going to get yolk into your 5 egg whites, which means that you have to start all over again, so you're going to waste 5 eggs right there. So the reason that we crack our egg whites over 1 separate bowl every time is to make sure that if you do mess up, which is bound to happen eventually, you only ever waste 1 egg, so you won't end up wasting 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 eggs. And that's a super useful tip that I learned relatively recently. Cool. Yeah. All right, so that's my egg white. Next up is going to be a 1/4 cup each of flour, cornstarch, and soda water. So starting off first, here's my cornstarch. Next up is flour, so this is just regular AP flour. And then finally, and this is one that I also picked up recently, and I think it actually does help. This is going to be soda water. If you don't have soda water, you can just use regular water. And I have done regular water in a tempura batter super often. It works just fine. But what will happen with soda water is that the carbonation of the soda water is going to create some extra air pockets in that batter when we start whisking it to combine. And that extra carbonation is going to give us some nice fluffy batter that you would still get a pretty fluffy batter without the soda water, but it's going to give us a little bit more fluff than we would normally get otherwise. So if you don't have soda water, you can absolutely skip it and just use regular water, and it will still come out great. But if you happen to have soda water on hand, if you have a soda stream like I do, you can definitely use a 1/4 cup of that. And you'll notice, I think you can see it. But if you look super close, yeah, I think you can see it. There's lots of bubbles that are starting to form. It's more or less a result of carbonation happening. So we zoom super close. Yeah, there you go. All of that carbonation is starting to create some fizz. We have all of these tiny little air pockets, which are going to help us get a super fluffy batter. So that's our batter. Let me get my wok going. Yeah. Cool. Next up, if you want to be really careful, you could do these one at a time. I have stopped being super careful, so what I'm just going to do is drop my chicken breast or chicken thigh straight into the batter. And today we're going with chicken thigh today. If you don't have chicken thigh, you can use chicken breast too. It will work fine. Anytime that I deep fry chicken, you'll probably see me using chicken thigh just because it has a little bit more fat. Yeah, but the real main reason why we're using chicken thigh today instead of chicken breast is because it has the right size that we can use. So we're trying to put it inside of a sandwich. And if we use chicken breast, it's going to be a lot more difficult to work with because it's going to be really long. We're probably going to have to fillet it. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to work with because it's the wrong size. So it's not going to quite fit in that sandwich. So chicken thigh, it's just going to work better because it's going to be closer to the size and shape of a patty. That's the real reason. But generally speaking, anytime that I'm deep frying, you will also see me using chicken thigh too, because it has a little bit more fat, which helps a lot in the deep fry. So that's our chicken breast or chicken thigh. I'm not going to start mixing this because our fryer's not ready yet. But I just started reheating my fryer or heating up my fryer oil, and once that hits 350, we can start deep frying. Probably should have turned that on a little earlier. Cool. Has more flavor. Yeah. Thor's got. Yeah. Lots of people say that that chicken thigh has more flavor. It definitely has more fat and it has more sodium content. So hypothetically, you could argue that it has more flavor. I have never really found a difference. I know that people say that a lot, that it like has more flavor to it, but like I've done a lot of A/B testing with fried chicken, so this comes up a lot in the Chinese American hack series, where I'll like try 2 different versions of General Tso's chicken, one with chicken breast and one with chicken thigh, and then we'll compare them. And I've never really found a big difference. It's just like maybe the chicken thigh, arguably the chicken breast might come out a little bit more like crispy because it has less fat, and therefore if it has less fat, it's shedding less moisture in the wok fry, or at least in the deep fry, which means if it has less moisture in the deep fry, then it hits that high heat point. It'll cook faster, which means if it cooks faster, it's going to fry a lot more crispier, which I've never really experienced that actually being true. It pretty much just tastes the same to me. Both of them are chicken, so they really don't taste like much after at a certain point. It doesn't really taste like anything. Frying with fat on chicken thigh always, yeah. So yeah, that's like the real reason why I like using chicken thigh more is because it has more fat. So that higher fat content like creates a little bit more richness, and hypothetically creates a little bit more flavor. But really though, it just makes it a little bit more tender. Although, like, in all honesty, the more that I have fried chicken, especially with the ones where we're chopping them up, like things like General Tso's chicken or honey sesame chicken or orange chicken, all of those things, you really can't tell a difference because especially once it's diced up and stuff, you're not going to tell a difference. I have a theory, so I have like, the more that I've investigated things like Panda Express recipes, the more that I've discovered every single Panda Express recipe that uses fried chicken, I've found always uses chicken breast. And for a long time, I was trying to investigate why. And a lot of the recipe videos were from that series, from the Chinese American Hack recipe series. I've done like A/B tests. I think on every single one, I've done an A/B test of them. And taking a look at like what's the difference between chicken breast and chicken thigh, and why does Panda Express always use chicken breast? And the real reason that I think that they use that is it's for marketing purposes, because chicken breast technically has less fat, so technically is healthier. And I think that that's probably the reason why they're using chicken breast, which obviously makes no sense and is really dumb because you're eating fried chicken, so who cares? Like, at that point, yeah, who really cares? You were having the same conversation with the person who was streaming. Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, Ozzy, good question. Yeah, what is a long yao? So lots of people ask about that. So a long yao is the process of adding cold oil or like room temperature oil to a very, very hot wok. So we preheat the wok and then add our oil to it. And then once we have that really, really hot wok with room temperature oil, what happens, if you coat that wok in that oil, you create a nice non-stick surface. So if you do it backwards, which I have tried out once or twice before, what will happen is if you put cold oil into a cold wok and then try and reheat it, which I sometimes do with things like olive oil, and like when I scramble eggs, definitely with butter, when I scramble eggs, I'll do that. Put like cold butter into a cold pan and then heat the pan up, because you can regulate the temperature of the butter a little bit better. If you do that in a wok, though, what will happen is everything was going to stick to the wok. It's going to be a very, very sticky wok. So you'll have like literally everything will stick to it. If you don't long yao, literally everything will stick to it. I've had situations where freaking like onions stuck to the pan, which is crazy. I did not know that onions can stick to a wok. So super, super important every time that you work in a wok, especially if you're working with something like cast iron or carbon steel, but also stainless steel too. You want to do that long yao first to make sure that nothing sticks to it. Yeah, cool. Cool. So I'm waiting for my wok to heat up. We're at 240. We're looking for 350 here, so we have another 100 degrees to get that wok. Usually what I like doing is frying at 350, so 350 F. What I usually will do when I'm looking for 350 is I'll probably shoot for closer to 370, sometimes 375. And what that accommodates for is that the chicken is going to be very, very cold because it just came right out of the refrigerator, which means that when we put it into the oil, the temperature of the oil is going to immediately drop. So it's going to drop at least 10, 15 degrees as soon as we put that chicken in. So by overshooting 350 a little bit, it kind of helps us stay right around 350 and not like lose a lot of heat. And then if you like drop too low, so if you've ever tried to fry chicken and the temperature of the oil drops to like 250, sometimes 300, you start running into issues with like the batter will start getting a little bit mushy. Sometimes if it drops really low, the chicken won't even cook, so you'll end up with raw chicken inside. So super, super important that temperature needs to be pretty hot in order to make sure everything fries correctly. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we're getting the shimmer. Yeah, that's if we were frying, that's really important. In a deep fry, that's what the thermometer is for. Super useful. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Right now, we're waiting for our wok to heat up, so I'll give a quick introduction again. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. With new recipes out every Friday over on the YouTube channel. So I know lots of folks are already watching over on the YouTube channel. But if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. You could watch on either platform. Both of them are going to be great. But over on the YouTube platform, there's a whole list of all of the things that I'm going to be streaming for, I think, like 3 weeks now. It goes out a long time. So if you want, you can check out that list and find out what I'm going to be cooking. The YouTube stream also has an ingredients list for everything that I'm going to be. You'll need to cook what I'm cooking. Which means that lots of folks do this too, is that you can go and pick up those ingredients and you can cook stuff with me, which is super, super fun. It's always more fun to cook with other people, because if we mess up, then we can tell each other that we messed up. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. That live stream is super, super fun. We're working our way to 3,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that goal, please subscribe. Every Friday there's new recipe videos, so if you see me live streaming, almost always when you see me live streaming, I'm cooking through a recipe video that has come out on that channel. So I know lots of folks probably have followed me. I saw someone asked about long yao, which means they probably saw it come up in a GIF recipe. So lots of folks know about this channel from GIF recipes, which has a short 1-minute version of some of those recipes. The YouTube videos, they're a lot longer. They're like 8-10 minutes long. We like talk through some of the decision making that goes behind the recipes that I'm writing, and like why I add certain stuff why I leave some stuff out, and like generally a lot of like the inspiration behind the things that I'm cooking. There's a couple of series that are going on right now. This particular one, it comes from my favorite series, which is the Chinese American Hack series, where we kind of like deconstruct a lot of food from Chinese American cuisine and take a look at like what are the American qualities of Chinese American cuisine, and like what happened to Chinese food when it came to America, and what were Chinese people doing to make those foods work. So like to get American people to eat that food. So that's really interesting with stuff like this, like a gochujang glazed fried chicken, or like a General Tso's chicken, or a honey sesame chicken. All of those things super interesting because none of those things come from Chinese cuisine or Korean cuisine or any Asian cuisine. It's just American food. Like this is just a American fried chicken. So stuff like that comes up on the channel a lot, and usually what I'll do is I'll do a second version, and we'll kind of like take a look at what it looks like to try and reproduce those recipes without the American qualities. So like what does General Tso's chicken look like if it wasn't so American? So a lot of times I'll do like incorporate ingredients that are really common in like traditional Chinese wok cooking, but not super common in American Chinese cooking, and like kind of take a look at like what happens when you mash those two things together, which is super interesting. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube, check it out. Lots of people I know like to binge watch those series. I think there's like 3 or 4 hours of recipe videos now, so if you want, you can binge watch the entire channel and just let it roll for half a day, which people do. Ooh, Sarah, yeah, street food series, that would be super fun. A lot of the food that I cook is already street food, so it would mostly just be like in a combination of collecting all of the things that I have already cooked. But so many things like that I have cooked come from street food. So like all of the noodle dishes, so like dandamian, dajamian, egg foo young, that definitely comes from fried street food. Just generally, if you notice that like if I'm cooking something that's Chinese and it's plated really weird, so like, or if it has no plating at all, so like especially all of the noodle dishes, those like have no plating, it's really just dumped into a bowl. That probably means that it came from street food cooking, because that's how it's assembled. It's done on the street, so they're not really paying attention to plating. So, but yeah, that would be super fun. Cool. Pineapple Lord, yeah, hey, how's it going? Good. How's your day going? How's everyone's day going? Yeah. Cool. So that's the YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out yet, definitely hop over and check that out. I'm ready to start frying some chickens, so let's do this. So real quick, let's take a look at our chicken before I start messing it around with it. Normally, I would advocate for the left hand, or wet hand, dry hand method of coating with your left hand and then battering with your right hand to keep one of your hands dry. But in this case, I don't actually think it's going to make that much of a difference because we have a very wet batter. So I'm going to do these one at a time and very carefully adding this to my fryer oil. Fryer oil is extremely hot, so be very careful anytime that you're working with it. And most importantly, once that chicken is in the fryer, I'm keeping a very close eye on the temperature of my thermometer and making sure that this fryer does not drop below 350. If it drops below 350, if it drops too far below 350 at least, we're going to end up with some super soggy chicken. So we want that temperature to stay pretty high here. It will, of course, immediately start dropping as soon as we add it to the fryer because the chicken is a lot colder than the fryer oil. But that's okay. So I'm going to give that, it'll probably go for like a minute or two before we flip it. But we want to give it a good amount of time on either side to make sure that it gets a good, solid, even browning. Do I make desserts? Yes, I do. I totally make a lot of desserts. What was the last dessert I made? I think the last thing we did was a malai gao, which is a Malaysian brown sugar cake, which is one of my favorite cakes. You see it in dim sum a lot. I don't know why it comes up. I don't know why dessert comes up in dim sum so much, but yeah, you see it in dim sum, in like dim sum carts a lot. We also did a Portuguese egg tart, which I guess that's a dessert. It's more of a pastry. But yeah, we do a lot of like baked goods. We also did sweet custard buns and cocktail buns, both of which come from my childhood. Things that I've been eating since I was a little kid. All right, so I totally forgot, but what I'm gonna do is give this a par cook. That's my tray. So I'm pulling this out. It is obviously still very pale, so we can take a look. Here's our par fried chicken. So we can look very closely. It is super pale. This is not the texture or color of fried chicken that you want if you want to eat it. This is still raw for sure. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull it out of the fryer and then let it rest for about 3-4 minutes. And what's gonna happen is a lot of moisture is gonna start coming out of that fried chicken. And once it's shed all of that moisture, we're gonna add it back to the fryer again. And that is going to give us the straight up the crispiest fried chicken that you will ever eat, for sure. In my experience, the double fry is the single most crispy fried chicken that I have ever done. And that's generally true for any type of fry. So that has worked with tempura batters, that's worked with buttermilk fries, that's worked with just like straight up egg batter fries. Really any kind of fried chicken. The double fry is going to change your life, I promise. Is the juices on the chicken going to stay on the chicken throughout the frying process? Yeah, if you do it correctly, yes. So if you keep the temperature of the oil hot enough. If it's not hot enough, it will start losing juice, and then you're going to get like really dry chicken. Sometimes it will be either overcooked or undercooked. The goal is that if you keep the temperature of the wok hot enough, it will it will finish cooking the fried chicken before it starts losing a lot of fat and moisture. But if it drops too low, though, it will start cooking it really, really slowly. And then it's going to start shedding moisture before it finishes cooking. So you'll either end up with either raw chicken that's still moist but still raw, or you'll finish it and it will be cooked chicken, but it's going to be really, really dry because it's slow cooked for too long. So super, super important is that's why I keep repeating this, but it's really, really important. The temperature of that oil is the most important part about frying chicken. Otherwise, frying chicken is just putting stuff in the fryer and then waiting a couple minutes. All right, so real quick, we could take a look. Here's our fried chicken. You will notice that both of these fried chicken, or pieces of fried chicken, are very, very pale. Generally not the color of fried chicken. I guess the contrast is doing a little bit of work for us, making it look nicer than it actually is. This is not the color of fried chicken that you ever want. If your fried chicken looks like this, it's probably raw inside. But the whole reason that we're pulling it out is when we let it rest for a couple of minutes. So we're gonna give it like a minute, maybe 2 minutes, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes per piece, to sort of rest and let some of that like the juices sort of rest and like stay or like stop like pulling out. What will happen is all of the moisture is going to lock into the fried chicken, and then when we add it back to the fryer the second time, we'll be able to get a much crispier piece of fried chicken because it's not going to be shedding moisture anymore. So I'm going to add my first piece back to the wok again, and we're going to go in for our second fry. Yeah. Oh, what flame level do I keep the stove at? I generally have to ride it, so generally speaking, I don't think there's any one temperature of the fire that I need to keep it at. Right now it's at high, but I'm also turning it down a little bit. So I usually will monitor the thermometer, and if it's not cooling down, so I just turn the fire down a little bit, because I noticed that the thermometer is not dropping down a little bit at all. So it's still sort of like sitting around 375 right now. Probably because the chicken wasn't as cold as I thought it would be, which means I just turned that fire down a little bit, so now we're closer to like medium, but when we started it was at high, so super useful. That's kind of one of the main reasons why I like frying in a wok, or deep frying in a wok, is because it reacts very quickly to the temperature changes in the flame, which is a big problem in some cases for wok frying, but in a deep fry in particular, if you notice that you're not like retaining enough heat, or if your fryer oil is too hot, it reacts very quickly. So if we try to do that, say, for example, in a Dutch oven, and I turn the fryer down, or turn the temperature of the fire down, the temperature of the wok or the fryer oil would not change as rapidly, because a Dutch oven retains heat so well that it would just stay very, very hot for at least 5 minutes. Dutch ovens take a long time to turn down. Alright, let's give this a flip. Yeah. Yeah, double fries, Sarah, yeah, double fries are magic on French fries too. I've also read a lot about, with French fries, is double fry and frozen French fries. And it's something about the properties of the potato being frozen makes it fry even better. Yeah, the second fry is definitely much longer. So the first fry was only about like maybe 2 minutes or so. Really what we're just trying to do is pull out some moisture. And then the second fry is where we're really going to start cooking. Otherwise, it would overcook for sure. Yeah, 350, that's what we're looking for, 350. You like a thermometer? Yeah. So that's one of the like give and takes of the thermometer. Like I know lots of people. So one of the big problems with having especially candy thermometers that are that large, is that it leaves a little bit of a metallic taste to it when you leave it in the fryer oil. So it kind of gives it a little bit off taste. The downside of it is that if you don't have that that thermometer in the fryer, you won't have a very good idea of what the temperature is, and then you're going to have a lot of problems with keeping that wok at the right temperature. So I in the give and take of like whether or not I want to keep the thermometer in, I've just opted to leave the thermometer in, because otherwise you're not going to be able to tell. I've also messed around with smaller thermometers a lot. So like thermometers that have like a small needle point, and that like doesn't leave as much of an aftertaste to it. But every time that I've done that, it's melted. So I've melted through like four small candy thermometers now. So I've stopped messing around with cheap tiny thermometers. But regardless of all that, I am a strong advocate of leaving the fryer or thermometer in the fryer, because otherwise you're not going to be able to keep a good idea of like what temperature the fryer oil is at. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Digital analog, yeah. I've gone back and forth. I've owned so many digital thermometers. At least 3 digital thermometers, but they just don't work. I've given up on digital thermometers because they just don't work. At some points, they just straight up they stop reading entirely. So my meat thermometer is digital, so the one that I'm going to use right now is digital, but my candy thermometer is fully analog, just because I just can't seem to get it to work otherwise. Alright, so let's take a look. This is nice and golden. Alright, here's my digital thermometer. We're looking for 160 internal to make sure that this is cooked all the way through. There it is. And then, so we can see the very clear difference. So this is the first fry. This is the second fry. It is much more golden and like a lot more developed. It's going to be super crispy, so you can't really hear it. But this one is very soft and squishy. This one is very crunchy and like crispy. So, and that all comes from the double fry. All right, so I'm adding my second piece back to the fryer. Now that some of that moisture has sort of shed out, and we're going to get our second fry going. Oh, do I stream on multiple sites? Yes, I do. So I mentioned this earlier too, but there's another laptop that's behind me. That laptop streams to YouTube. So if you're looking for the YouTube channel, that's youtube.com/WooCanCook. It's at the bottom of the screen. And there's that stream has. I've been told it has like more of a panoramic view, so if you're watching on desktop, it's a lot easier to watch on desktop, I've been told. And I think it has a higher resolution too. Definitely the cameras are nicer though. Yeah, no sympathy for the police. Yeah, the barbecue thermometers, I think that's what I'm going to go for next, where it just has a probe. I think those are actually meant for baking. So you use it as a probe, you put it in the oven, and you can use it for like baking chickens and stuff. They're really expensive. I haven't found one for like less than $50 yet, so that's on my like things to buy next. But for now, this works fine. But I have also like gone through so many like manual thermometers and just like cheap ones that I spent like $10-15 on. That I'm just like super frustrated with digital thermometers. At one point, one of the digital thermometers literally melted in the fryer oil. Like the thermometer itself ended up in the fryer because it just straight up melted. So I just given up. If it's not made of metal, I'm not gonna even bother with it. I'm just tired of thermometers breaking on me. Because they're like $10 a piece. Every time I buy a new thermometer, it's like another $10. One time, I think it was one of these, I bought a thermometer and it broke the first time I used it. I couldn't believe it. So frustrating. Joe Kelly, am I accepting gifts? Yeah, I do. We take donations. I forget to mention this a lot, but I actually do take donations over on the YouTube channel. I never really ask for money to stream. I just do it for fun. But if you want to help, especially if you watch on Reddit, you'll probably know that the mics crap out on Reddit a lot because I have a really cheap, this one, a cheap mic lapel mic from the 80s that goes to Reddit. So we're taking donations to help replace this stupid mic. So if you want to help raise money for a new lapel mic, that lives over on the YouTube channel. And I believe the donation link is streamlabs.com/woocancook. Yes, it is. It is the donation. So if you're watching on YouTube, there's a donation link at the top of the screen, which is called streamlabs.com/woocancook. Also, though, totally don't feel obligated to donate. Only donate if you can, or if you want to. But don't feel obligated to pay money. I never felt the need to stream for money. Cool. Ooh. So I just flipped my chicken, and then we're going to give it another 2 or 3 minutes. I also noticed that my temperature has dropped a little bit low. We're at 340 right now, so I'm turning the fryer oil back up, or the fire up a little bit more to kind of raise that temperature a little bit more to make sure that we don't end up with soggy fried chicken. Ooh, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. Thank you for the recommendations. $40. Ooh, that's an expensive thermometer. It just might be time. Maybe yeah. The one that I'm looking at, I really want is a Thermapen. I know that those for sure are $100, and they don't ever drop below $100 because they're probably like, I'm pretty sure the Thermapen is the industry standard of thermometers, and that's why they're so expensive. Oh, you're waiting for the glaze part. Yeah, that's gonna. So that's the tricky part of it. That's true for like all wok fries actually. But the glaze part, just like any other wok fry, happens at the very, very end, and it happens super quickly. So, but it's coming soon though. Yeah. Yeah, Thermapen. That's the one. That's the one. Like if you watch like any Bon Appetit stuff or like Binging with Babish, really like anyone who like has a well-funded kitchen, they're probably using a Thermapen. Same thing. Like there's like a lot of industry standard stuff. So like the Thermapen is the standard thermometer. The Le Creuset Dutch oven, that's the standard Dutch oven. Cast iron Lodge is the standard cast iron skillets. Stuff like that. Sur La Table makes like standard stainless steel pans. All of those are like industry standard stuff. But the big real industry standard is the Thermapen. But I don't know. I don't use it enough to really justify $100 on a stupid thermometer. Although I guess at this point I probably spent close to $100 on cheap thermometers. Cool. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that people get useful advice from these streams. Alright, let's check our temperature here. I'm not sure that this is done yet. I'm gonna take a look though. Just like the first piece, we're looking for 160 on the internal. I don't think this is done. Let's see. And 140-ish. Yeah, this is not quite done. I thought it might be the case. But I just wanted to double check. Yeah, we're at 140 internal on that second piece, so I'm going to give it another minute or two in the fryer to make sure we hit 160. Sometimes I like nudge around the 160 internal temperature. I like to shoot closer to like 145, 150 sometimes, especially for chicken thigh, just because it's a little bit more tender. But definitely like the FDA certification for like food temperature, internal temperature for chicken for it to be safe to eat, like FDA certified safe to eat, is 160. But very frequently I'll pull it out closer to 150, sometimes a little bit lower than that, because it's going to be a little bit more tender. Although legally, probably not supposed to say that. Yeah, I'd rather spend $100 more on more fried meat. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stop being cheap. Invest in a nice thermometer. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, I should stop investing in cheap crap. I think that's the real answer. Yeah. Cool. The stream where I go over the tools of the trade. Yeah, that would be fun to do on a stream. The FAQ on my website has a lot of the answers for that too, because people ask a lot of the same questions. We talk. I answer a lot of the commonly asked questions about like wok cooking and stuff. And there's definitely there's a kitchen essentials page on the FAQ of the homepage. There we go. That looks much better. And I think I could find that. Let's see. Yeah, it is. Here's the FAQ. And some of the FAQ stuff, it answers a lot of like the commonly asked questions and like a lot of the like kitchen essentials that live in my kitchen. Oops, this is not on. There it is. Cool. So here's our finished fried chicken. I should check the temperature one more time. There it is. So we have a nice 160 internal temp on both of our pieces of fried chicken. And then what we're going to do is remove our fryer oil very carefully. I can't stress enough how careful you need to be with fryer oil, because it is super dangerous. Right, and then what we're going to do, there's some space here, is I'm going to rinse my wok down. There's lots of brine that accumulates in a deep fry that's generally going to come off of the batter and stuff. So definitely don't just move straight into using your wok when you finish deep frying, because it's going to contain a whole bunch of like sediment, probably a lot of like the residuals of like the flour and like a little bit of cornstarch, just generally things that shed off of the fried chicken. All of those are things that you want to get out of the wok before you start frying. Otherwise, it's going to end up in your glaze. So before you start doing your glaze, give it a rinse and get all that sediment out before you start cooking. Yeah. Yeah, the FDA target. Yeah, exactly. I've never experienced that though. I have to test that out. Yeah, I'll have to test that out for sure. Cool. So I'm reheating my wok, and then we're gonna get to our glaze next. Super important anytime that you're wok cooking, and I say this with every wok fry too. But when you are cooking in a wok, very important that that wok is very hot before you start cooking. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with a mushy stir fry. So we want our wok to be as hot as humanly possible here to make sure that we have nice consistent heat. Cool. And then I'm adding, first up, it's not quite hot enough. Generally, if you're not sure if your wok is hot enough yet, what we're looking for is lots and lots of smoke. So there's a little bit of smoke coming off. You can see it going right now. Usually what I like to do is let it go past that smoke point for like maybe 30 seconds, 30, 45 seconds. Once we have nice amounts of smoke coming up off of the wok, you know that you're ready to start stir frying. But if you don't see that smoke yet, it probably means that your wok is not hot enough yet. Can you dump it in the sink? Oh yeah, definitely do not dump it in the sink. Yeah, that's like the number one thing you don't want to do with used fryer oil is dump it in the sink, because it will absolutely clog your drains. And when it cools down, it's going to just gunk up the drain. And so if you've ever seen someone like dump meat juices, this is true for any fat, so bacon grease, ground meat, juices from ground meats, even like fried eggs, like leftover fried eggs, you don't want that to end up down your drain because it's going to clog up your drain. Usually what I'll do is I'll save it, so I'm going to let that cool down, which will probably take almost 24 hours. And then once it's cooled down, you can pass it through a coffee filter and you can get another couple more uses out of it. Usually I can run a batch of oil for like 4 or 5 times before I have to throw it out. And then once it's done and once it's like no longer usable, then you need to take it to a recycling plant. So you also cannot toss fryer oil. Same thing for motor oil. You can't throw that in landfill. It's not recyclable. So you have to take it to a recycling plant, which is a little bit of a pain. But if you own a car and you're changing your own oil, like I do, you probably can do it all at the same time. So I have in my garage like a couple quarts of used motor oil plus a couple quarts of fryer oil, which will run to the recycling plant. Maybe twice a year or so. All right. So I'm adding my peanut oil here, but as I mentioned this earlier, super important with your glazes is that you don't want to add too much oil here. So I'm adding, that was maybe 2 tablespoons, maybe 3 tablespoons. No more than that. If you add too much oil at this point, you will have a lot of trouble getting that glaze to stick. And then I'm adding, next up are my aromatics. So that's my garlic and my ginger. And then the whites of my green onions. Just the whites. And then we're gonna give it a toss in the oil for just long enough until it's fragrant. We're looking for maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, usually no more than that. But start using your nose at that point. Make sure once you start smelling ginger and garlic, you're ready to move on. And that's our chicken going in, and followed lastly by our glaze. All right. And at this point, it is the reason why it is super important to not have too much liquid in the glaze, otherwise it won't stick to the chicken. And I'm just making sure everything is nice and coated. Need some chips to land. Alright. Yeah, I'll do it. Should have this over here. Bowls. So that's our fried chicken, and then super important, don't just dump this leftover glaze. That is going to be the source of all our dipping. Alright, and the last thing we want to do anytime that we wok fry, this is going to be true for any wok fry, is clean your wok while it's still hot. Give it a good rinse, and we can take a look. My wok is almost completely clean. Actually, I think it is completely clean. I didn't do any scrubbing, all I did was give it a rinse, and all of that stuff comes right off of the wok as soon as you give it a rinse. Because while your wok is still hot, it has a nice non-stick surface while it's hot. If you let it cool down and then you try and clean it, you're going to have a lot more trouble giving it a clean because stuff will stick to it. It's no longer non-stick. So just like a cast iron pan, I'm adding a little bit more oil and giving it a good coat of oil to make sure nothing oxidizes. And that is it for our wok. So. Last up is our potato buns. So I'm moving over to my cast iron pan. And I'm going to do a quick toast on my potato buns. Yeah. Oh yeah, Joe, good question. Yeah, where can you get the wok? Okay, Real Dirty Dan. Yeah, thank you. That's very kind of you. Joe, where do you get the wok? So that is definitely in the FAQ section. So if you live here in Oakland or if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, I got mine at a restaurant supply store. It's called Chenko. But if you don't live near in Oakland Chinatown. Pretty much any Chinatown district is going to have a very similar restaurant supply store. And that's because those are the supply stores that supply goods for all of the Chinese restaurants in the neighborhood. So if you go to a Chinatown, you will find something. If you don't live near Oakland and can't get to Chenko, you can find something similar at pretty much every other Chinatown, at least in the States, you'll find something pretty similar. If you don't live near Chinatown at all, though, I always recommend the Joyce Chen carbon steel flat bottom carbon steel wok, which you can find on Amazon. I think it's like $30 or something. And I've heard a lot of good things about it. I actually have a friend that has one of those, and I've cooked on his wok before, and it's really good. So. What kind of oil to clean the wok? So that was the last thing that I did was a season, and I just coated it in a little bit of peanut oil, a very small amount. Don't use too much oil for that final seasoning because it will start accumulating at the bottom, and then you'll have like a pool of oil at the bottom the next time you pull the wok out. But just enough to maybe a tablespoon, and then just give it a quick coat, just to make sure that everything is nice and coated in peanut oil, so that the next time you use it, it doesn't start rusting. Cool. And right now I'm just toasting up my potato buns, and then we'll be ready to eat. These are there. if you have never toasted a bun in a cast iron pan, I highly recommend it. It will outdo any toaster oven that you've ever used, for sure. And it just takes about the same amount of time with a little bit of butter. And you will never get a bun that looks like this in a toaster oven. It will never ever look like this. This only happens when you do it in a cast iron. Cool. So at this point, you could season, or you could finish it with whatever you want. This is Kewpie mayo, which is a Japanese type of mayo. Kewpie mayo, I think the main difference between Kewpie and then like Miracle Whip is it has like a little bit of sugar in it, so it's a little bit sweeter. All right. Did I butter them buns? Them buns. I toasted them in butter, so they're very buttery already. So I'm not going to butter them again. But if I didn't toast, if I had done them in a toaster oven, then I would definitely butter them for sure. So that's my chicken first, obviously the highlight of the show. And then next up is a little bit of kimchi. I believe the original Shake Shack version that I had based this off of uses a kimchi slaw, which is pretty similar. Mostly just like a combination of kimchi and cabbage. That's essentially what a kimchi slaw is. But I actually think that the use of kimchi, just straight kimchi, is going to be a lot more effective because it is going to be a lot more flavorful. All right. Next up is a little bit of sesame seed. And then finally the greens of our green onions. And a little bit of this glaze. And that ought to do it. I think in the original recipe I had made actual French fries for this, but I don't have French fries today, so we're just eating potato chips. All right. A cooking party, yeah, yeah. I host cooking parties with my COVID pod a lot, my quarantine pod. Let's see, let's taste this. This is gonna be super messy. Oh yeah, yeah. This is one of my favorite. I think one of my favorite recipes that I've made. Like very, very nice umami that's coming from that gochujang. That glaze is really sticking, and I think the big element is that we were able to do the glaze fast enough where it doesn't spend too much time in the wok, because if it had spent too much time in that wok, then it would start getting soggy. But it's not soggy because it only spent maybe 30-45 seconds top cooking in that glaze, and then after that it just came right out and it's nice and adhesive. I think a big element, one of the hardest parts of doing a glazed fried chicken is getting that glaze to stick. So there's a combination of a couple of things. Number one is that we didn't use very much liquid. I used full sodium soy sauce today. This is one of the only times that I use full sodium soy sauce. But I think the big element is that the gochujang plus the honey and the sweet chili sauce, all three of those, they contain a lot of sugar and they're really, really thick. And that thickness is what allows the glaze to stick. Otherwise it would just drop right off. Yeah, so one of my favorites, if you've never had a gochujang glazed fried chicken, I definitely recommend taking a shot at this. I know this is one of the recipes that a lot of people have tried now. I've seen At least 5 or 6 people have sent me pictures of this attempt of trying this glazed fried chicken. I know I saw one person did a version of this where they used, instead of potato buns, they did it in a taco, which looked really good. I've seen a couple other people do the same thing in potato buns for sure. And it's just been one of the really popular recipes over on the YouTube channel. So highly recommend it. If you don't take a shot at it, it's one of my favorite things to deep fry is this particular gochujang glazed fried chicken. So I wouldn't necessarily call it Korean food, but I would say like Korean inspired fried chicken. Definitely a tempura batter is not Korean. So yeah. So let me know if you try this one. It's one of my favorites. Real quick, here's the recipe video one more time. Yeah, much easier. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I know lots of people like to do the glaze off heat too. I've seen lots of folks, especially with like chicken wings, they'll like do the glaze in a big bowl and just toss it too, which is another solution. But I like doing it in a wok because it will have allowed the heat to cook off some of the acidity of the things that we use, especially like the rice vinegar, for example. Giving it a little bit of heat allows for like that glaze to reduce a little bit, which is a nice opportunity to kind of get a really, really thick and adhesive glaze. So, yeah. Yeah, Dutch homie. Yeah, thank you. That's this. I'm sorry. I should keep. I always forget to mention the donate link. But if you want to help donate, do not feel obligated to donate. But if you want to help, it's streamlabs.com/WooCanCook, and that's where that leads straight to my PayPal. And we can help replace this stupid mic, which keeps dropping out. So, yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If you haven't caught one of these streams before, if this is your first time, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. And then new recipes coming out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So, like I mentioned, over on the YouTube channel, it has the Streamlabs link too, so you can take a look. I think there's a donate bar, so I think we're at $75, something like that. But also do not feel obligated to donate. If you don't want to donate or if you can't donate, that's totally fine too. There are plenty of other ways to help support. If you want, we're working our way to 3,500 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want, please subscribe. If you don't feel like subscribing or if you're already subscribed, you could share it too. That also helps a lot too. There are a couple of different series that are living over on that YouTube channel. That's also where the concurrent live stream lives. So that's where the schedule of streams lives. So if you want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, that will all live over there. If you were watching over on YouTube, those folks who watched on YouTube, I think probably knew 2-3 weeks ago that I would be doing this recipe. So let's see. Coming up this Friday is going to be egg foo young. That's going to be really good, which is really, really interesting because I don't know very much about egg foo young, or I didn't know very much about egg foo young. But in my research, I discovered that a real or like truly traditional egg foo. First of all, I didn't know that egg foo young is actually a traditional recipe, but it actually does come from traditional Chinese street cooking. But a true egg foo young, it's not actually scrambled or fried like you would most commonly see in egg foo young in Chinese cooking, or at least American Chinese cooking. An egg foo young is actually supposed to be deep fried, which is way interesting because if you've ever tried to deep fry scrambled egg, it's crazy because it will happen so fast. Deep frying scrambled eggs, you can imagine scrambled eggs are very, very delicate, right? So like the deep fry happens in like a minute, and like at a minute 30 it's overcooked. So one of like the more interesting things that I've had to or tried to figure out is how to deep fry egg foo young. So that's coming up this Friday. Next Friday is going to be, I think, dandan mian. We're doing a second shot at dandan mian. Last Friday was chicken katsu, beef chow fun came out last Friday, and then the Friday before that was chicken katsu, I believe. So lots of fun stuff going on over there. Oh, Hermina, that's you. Oh, cool. Yeah, Dutch homie. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. So yeah, lots of fun stuff living over on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please do. And yeah, I think that's it. Egg foo young, we're going to be live streaming that one. That's going to be a live streaming on Monday. Next week. So if you check out the recipe video, that's coming out tomorrow, and the live stream will be happening on Monday. Oh, and the last thing I'll mention, so there are beats that play under my voiceover. If you hadn't noticed, there's a new beat that's playing under my voiceover. That's the track that's featuring a buddy of mine. His name is Jay, and that's coming out tomorrow. So if you haven't checked out the music, that all lives over on the Spotify account, which is called Woo Cooks Beats, and there's a new track that's coming out tomorrow. And it is also, I think, the first track that's going to play when I switch scenes. So So yeah, if you haven't followed on Spotify, definitely follow on Spotify. There's a new track. It's coming out tomorrow, or first thing tomorrow, which I think is happening on EST. So it probably is releasing in 8 minutes. I think it's probably going to drop on Spotify in 8 minutes. So that's coming up tomorrow, and I'll see you all soon. All right, bye.
You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're as warm as a glass of brandy. Darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
Coming out of